You're listening to a podcast from thespoilist.com. Welcome to First Contact. How are you today? You look great. I'm Andrew.
I'm James.
And I'm Alex.
This time we are talking about Cause and Effect. It was written by Brannon Braga, directed by Jonathan Frakes, and first aired 23rd of March 1992. James, so what is it?
I've never seen one before, but I'm guessing it's a time loop episode.
A time loop episode?
Every science fiction show has one. It structures the episodes around a series of repeated events where time and matter have no consequences.
So this thing is putting a format into the universe?
Well, that's why we're doing these time loop references in this podcast.
So what is it?
I've never seen one before, but I'm guessing it's a time loop episode.
A time loop episode?
Every science fiction show has one. It structures the episode around a series of repeated events where time and action have no consequences.
So this thing is putting a format into the universe?
That's why we're doing these time loop references in this podcast.
What time loop references?
Like just there where we repeated ourselves for comedic effect in the style of the Red Dwarf classic White Hole.
So what is it? Only joking.
If we concentrate, we can override these outdated gags and state that the Enterprise gets stuck in a time loop and keeps exploding when a ship comes through an anomaly and hits it. But somehow, the crew start to remember what's happened before.
So it's decided then, we just get on with the episode.
Hey, wait a minute, I missed the discussion.
Because of the time phenomena.
No, I was just scrolling on my phone.
Anyway, Alex, you had never seen this episode before. What did you think of it?
I feel like maybe a few episodes ago, I sort of asked for this. I swear that there was an episode which we all kind of disliked and said that it's possible to do a bottle episode and have it be fun like the bottle episode in the first series of Star Trek Discovery. Now, that may be a hypocritical memory. However, I fairly guarantee that no one's going to go back and check in any of our previous episodes, so I feel fairly safe in saying it. Yeah, I mean, that's basically what it is, isn't it? It's a bit of fun.
I know time loops are a thing and have been in science fiction for a long time, but everyone goes, well, I don't think they really existed before Groundhog Day, which is clearly nonsense. But as a kind of TV format type thing, this sort of relatively fresh at this point.
Yeah, I think in terms of on television specifically, and on more specifically on sort of big primetime mainstream television, it's not as commonplace at this point as it would be now.
Seemingly so fresh for television that some audience members complained to the network.
I mean, again, I really don't believe that. But perhaps, who knows? I mean, as a teaser, as the start of an episode, brilliant. I think this is the best teaser ever. It's just great. It's not Data performing in a play or Picard going to a painting class or anything like that. It is straight in with the action. Something's gone very, very wrong. The lighting is all dark and it looks much better. It's a disaster, and then the Enterprise explodes, and you're like, and run credits. Wow, that's how you start an episode. Get me invested in that in your bottle show with something absolutely massive like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the only time that's ever topped in Star Trek is the Enterprise episode, which opens with the destruction of Earth.
Only one way to go from there, you know.
I think you've got to say, if you're going to start an episode with a really nice model shot like you have here, why not build an episode around repeatedly using the same model shot as much as is physically possible? Get your money's worth. I appreciate that.
So I guess the structure of this episode is interesting. You play out the first loop, which is basically structured around a poker game, is a massive part of it. This is surprisingly, probably to some, it's quite Crusher heavy. this one, I mean, a lot of people say she never gets to lead an episode, but I would say this is very much a kind of Crusher-led one, sort of following her day in many ways. They're playing poker, she gets a call, she has to go and see Geordi, and then she's in her quarters with a pink lace in her hair, drinking her pre-bed liqueur.
Well, I don't know about you, but I can't get any sleep unless I've downed several litres of rosé.
And then she puts that onto the panel beside her bed, like the one thing you want to keep clear because it's buttons that you might want to press, but she puts her glass there, doesn't clear it into the replicator. You never know when you might wake up in the night and just want a little dribble of some vermouth or something like that.
The woman has a problem. She has a problem. But she's the medical officer. Who's she going to go and see?
Well, certainly not Councillor Troy.
I'm sensing white lightning.
And then she hears voices, and they have a meeting, and she says, lots of people have reported hearing voices. And they go, well, that's very interesting, Doctor. Do you remember that time when you were alone in the universe and we believed you then? We'll believe you now. We believe that you're hearing voices. Are you still drinking right before you go to bed?
I was going to say, yeah. Doctor, we've been through this. How many litres? Have you considered mixers? Beck's do a lovely alcoholic-free beer these days.
From the meeting, then the crew are called to the bridge, and basically there's a wobbly thing in space. A ship flies out of it, hits the Enterprise, sends it into a spin, it explodes, and everything starts again. And then we play out this loop 4 times, slight variations. Now, I love how they do this. Like, every single one of the same scenes, now condensed in some cases, but every time the shots are completely different until by the 4th one, it is like absolutely unhinged. Like really low angles, or you've got this great shot over the top in the observation line. All these shots that you'd never do, that don't fit the cinematic style of the show. Like in the second one, when they start to realise that the cards are playing out like they predict, you do like extreme close-ups of them, and it's just really clever coding, because although those people complained, it looks completely different every single time. The show is different. It would have been so easy just to play this again, but it's the show visually telling that story and playing it out for you, and I very much appreciate that. I think it's so neatly done, and it tells you something's off as well. You know, I think we complained on some other podcast at some point about Discovery and how the camera just moves around and shakes, and they do cool shots with absolutely no motivation. But here, you're aware something's wrong. Like, your motivation comes from the audience by the visual storytelling of it, and that's great. I just really like that.
And the other thing that I would credit them with, and we'll come to later, but when we've had similar episodes where you kind of know what's going on before the crew do, and you're waiting for them to catch up, we've complained before where that's been tedious because it is just playing catch up and we're waiting around and waiting around. Here, they managed to combine that by having that element, yes, although balancing it out, as you say, with the different choices of camera shots, but that there's still this other mystery that we still won't get resolved right until the end. They found the solution to those dull episodes of season 1 and 2 in season 5.
It's just a very good script, and you've got that whole problem with a time loop of, okay, well, how do you vary it? And this very sort of slow learning that, although you're not actually remembering, on some level they are, because the time is echoing back on itself, and you get the clues fed into that with the echoes, with those voices that Crusher records on her tricorder. So it means that you can have that procedural investigative element, and then doing stuff with Geordi's visor as well, which is quite neat. The sort of the ghost images that he's seeing, all these little bits that that play into that. And even the use of poker, like we talked about that in the last episode, The Outcast, where they play poker and they use poker as a metaphor for men's and women's games, and it doesn't really work. But here, where you've got that, and you've got them turning and predicting, and it's like, it's almost like a tarot card. It's like, this is your fate when I turn the card. So it works on many levels. And even that thing where you've got Geordie saying, oh, I almost fell off the top of engineering, and it's like, oh, but the person grabbed me, and it's just like, okay, did you actually fall to your death on the first loop, and somebody actually caught you because they anticipated that?
In the first loop, he didn't go to sickbay at all, because he only had the ghost images from the first loop onwards. So the first time that they went around, that's when the ghostly images would have started in his visor.
And then ultimately the plot, and we're talking more plot than we usually do, but that's what it is they manage to send a message back in time, but a subconscious message inside Data's brain for the number 3, a really cryptic message that he's able to add at the last minute. And what luck it was that it was a binary choice between opening the shuttle bay doors to create an explosion, essentially, or using the tractor beam, which Data explains for far too long while the ship comes towards them. Just be faster, Data. Just do it.
And I think that's probably my biggest criticism of the episode. Riker hanging over Data, standing in an area of the bridge he never stands in.
just so he's like, his pips are right in his eyeline.
I did think that was, I agree. That's the most tenuous part of all of it. And to the extent, it did seem a bit of a jump to have the realization for him that, oh, I see this on Riker, therefore I mustn't do this. I mean, it would be very easy to read that message differently. I just keep seeing 3 recurring everywhere. 3 recurring. Pie. I need to leave the bridge and make a pie.
Maybe in one of the loops, he just runs onto the bridge with a pie.
But however, I think it is... Riker does stand on things and in weird positions and lean on stuff a lot. He's a very physical kind of man, so perhaps that's it's not that implausible for him. He does like putting his leg onto stuff.
He likes putting his leg over chairs to sit on them in a very strange way, but he doesn't tend to stand like that. It could have worked if maybe Data had some strange reading and then Riker went over to him to look at his comm panel, but instead he's just standing somewhere in the bridge he never does for no reason other than to have his pips in somebody's eyeline.
God, you don't want that. You'd be up for a disciplinary.
The thing about stuff like that is, if you did see it once, and we sort of mentioned the episode of Red Dwarf White Hole at the start there, and they've got that scene that scene that we parodied there, in case anyone wondered what we were doing. We don't really care. This is just for us. And they have that so what is it time loop scene, and you see in that like their very deliberate actions, like Lister taking his hat off and Rimmer leaning forward as he talks, and it when you see these things once, they maybe seem fine, but once you see them multiple times, you do really notice the actions and the movements that each of these characters takes, and it becomes very unnatural and very stagey. So I think perhaps there's a bit of that with where Riker is, but it's fine because it works and it makes sense. I'm not sure, like, his idea seems to me like it would work, but there you go. What can we say about that? Space is weird.
I mean, at least he has an idea. He's more effective than some of them. I mean, Picard, for example, is presented with the evidence that, there seems to have been a disaster. It seems like the ship may have exploded. Really? Yes, look, here's audio of you saying the ship's exploding. Oh dear, that is terrible. So what shall we do? Well, I think carry on as normal. See what turns up.
Yes, I mean the biggest inconvenience for him is that he feels like he's read the same chapter of his book more than once on his very uncomfortable reading couch. And obviously Dr. Crusher visits him in distress in the night, and he recommends some steamed milk. Stay off the bedtime liqueurs, Beverly. Have this with some delicious... Was it nutmeg? Marvellous.
Yeah, it wasn't something that sounded particularly appealing to me as a pre-bed drink.
I find it quite interesting. I mean, not interesting, but notable that Michelle Forbes is in this episode as Ro, but with absolutely nothing to do. She's just there.
I wondered about that. Yeah.
There must have been a deleted scene.
Do you think so? Is it... Maybe, I was going to say, would it be filmed back to back with something else? But of course it wouldn't be filmed back to back with something else. Because it's just like, but usually in the episode she's in, she gets invited to the senior staff meetings and gets to sit there. But no, she's just on the bridge and basically is doing less than Wesley Crusher would have done in a season 3 episode.
Maybe she's contracted to a certain number of episodes, so they just thought, she can be in this one.
It's that thing from In the Loop. She's room meat. Just fill in the space. Someone's got to do it.
To be honest, I would rather it was her. I like a little bit of consistency in my people who get to sit next to Data. I mean, yeah, I guess the finale we should talk about in some depth. It's the Bozeman, captained by Kelsey Grammer. They're wearing the uniforms and on the set from Star Trek 6.
But chronologically, the uniforms are before Wrath of Khan.
Yeah, so they're 20 to 78, which is 4 to 6 years, depending on what source you believe, before the Wrath of Khan. So, I mean, this is just sort of quite close to the motion picture. It's in that decade of the motion picture, so delighted we didn't see them in their weird space pajamas. The original plan was that they wanted to have a refit Constitution class ship coming through, which would have been cool, I think. And I think there was even suggestions of getting them in the original series garb and stuff, but was not to be. I think there was at one time a plan. I say I think, like I've not just read about this. There was a plan to build an original series style bridge as well, which would have been cool, but I don't think was worth it for what we got to see on it. I think it's actually quite nice seeing the sort of movie era come through. It does very much suggest a different era, but kind of unites the Star Trek of the time.
I just hope that when they do make it to the ship for that conversation with Picard, that when they realise what an awful situation it is, the first person they see after the meeting isn't Dr. Crusher. Oh, it's terrible news. Well, if you want something to help you cope, I've got several bottles in my quarters.
It is quite strange, though, that the episode opens with special guest star Kelsey Grammer, and he's in the last 10 seconds.
I mean, it's a small part. I mean, there was also, I mean, this is one of those facts that all Star Trek fans know, is that they wanted Kirstie Alley to come back as Saavik, but they couldn't make it work. And I think that's good. I think that would have been a bit too much, to be honest, for that, and especially given there's not a lot to do.
Would the ending have been less effective if it wasn't somebody famous as the captain?
I mean, I think it's quite nice because you've got that reveal, and obviously it's just like, well, it's a ship from the past, but I think there's something quite good with it being a known actor playing that part. I think there's a bit of fun in that. It just makes it feel a bit bigger than it is, because it's a guy on a view screen. Ultimately, if it was just like some random guy, it might not have had the impact. But it's sort of like that resolution, and it's a familiar TV face, and you just sort of look fondly upon it and go, okay, this is good. I am satisfied with this conclusion.
I mean, he's not just a familiar TV face. This is the guy from Money Plane.
Edit in Kelsey Grammer saying Money Plane many, many times.
The only other thing I want to say is, how badly designed is the Enterprise that it just gets a bit of a nick on the starboard nacelle and it just blows up.
It's just the way it hit it. To be fair, it's lucky that this happened at this particular point. If it had blown up at any other time, it would have been an absolute disaster. Let's hope it doesn't blow up in some other time anomaly in the future again. But yeah, I think this is a very good, very fun script, very well performed and very well directed.
One minor criticism: the fire effect on the bridge. It's not the best.
Everyone's a critic. No, it's not. But the bridge looks nice. It looks nice in its red alert lighting.
Particularly after you've not long ago rewatched Generations, and also not long ago we've seen Picard season 3, which lights the Enterprise D bridge much better. You do, especially after Generations, which lit the bridge so poorly. You do appreciate when they light it very well. You know things are getting serious, in episodes like Yesterday's Enterprise and Cause and Effect when it's dark lighting on the bridge.
I like the darkest bridges. I want it so you can't see anything.
Well, Generations is the film for you.
That's why I love Picard season 3. It's just like, I want it so the actors are almost blind.
No, one of the characters is, though.
Data?
I think we all enjoyed that, but let's see if we've got anything to say in Quickfire.
Don't hold your breath.
Quickfire.
So, the ship is called the Bozeman after Brannon Braga's hometown of Bozeman, Montana, which is where they would set the film Star Trek First Contact, and that is where the humans first had contact with the Vulcans. Sorry to spoil that if you've not seen it. But yeah, that's nice. And then in the universe, you can obviously say that is why the ship is called that. The ship, while we're talking about it, is a redress of the Reliant model from Star Trek 2.
I'm sure you're wondering, in the vast amounts of Star Trek novels and various continuations, whether we ever went back and seen what happens with Captain Bateson. I'm sure you're wondering that. He's never named on screen, of course, but that's what he's called. And he actually fought against 10 Borg cubes that were threatening Vulcan in the year 2381. And they managed to save the day. And Bateson led the fleet, obliterated the Borg, and sent a sarcastic message to Command, thanking them for permission to engage the Borg. And also, one of his lieutenants ended up trying to go back in time to stop her family from dying in the past, but failed thanks to the time agency, the Department of Temporal Investigations. You see, they didn't want to do any continuation for the alien species in last week's episodes, but they want to write all about these people from the past.
Rick Berman instructed Jonathan Frakes not to reuse any footage to ensure every loop was filmed in a different way. So as such, some scenes were shot almost in a sitcom style, multiple camera angles to avoid having to do the same shot twice. Frakes recalls, I'd watched a lot of directors by then and directed a few episodes, so I knew all the possible bridge angles, and I think I knew them, which is what we've said, which was kind of nice, I think.
I would have liked to see the version where they had to go on for several more hours and just the increasingly bizarre shots. Just shots of people's shoes.
I mean, I think the whole thing of the Bozeman and kind of, and Captain Bateson, that's almost like an interesting spin-off show it could have been. Like, what's it like arriving in a different time? And I'm aware that they've done that in Discovery. And I'm pretty sure that was the pitch for season 1 of Discovery, and in Brian Fuller's original plan for it is that when they went into the mirror universe, they wouldn't have come out a year later. They would have come out in the Next Generation era, 100 years later, which might have been a bit more interesting. And I think then the show was meant to then go off with another ship anyway. But hey, that's quite cool. And as you've mentioned, Bateson has many more adventures, and of course appears in an episode of Star Trek Lower Decks.
Does he?
In Lower Decks, in 2381, Captain Bateson was instrumental in leading an elite team that exonerated Captain Carol Freeman from false charges that she was responsible for the destruction of the Pakled homeworld. In reality, they had framed Captain Freeman, which Bateson helped prove. He doesn't have a speaking part in that, it's just sort of shown in as little sort of storyboards. But there you go. He went on to have a successful and canon Star Trek career in the future.
Are you suggesting that the Star Trek novels are not canon?
I reject the idea of canon, so whatever.
Captain Bateson fought 10 Borg cubes that were trying to attack Vulcan for some reason, and he defeated them and sent a sarcastic message. It is written. Nurse Ogawa gets a name, the recurring nurse in sickbay.
And what is it?
Ogawa.
Oh!
It's the first time we hear her surname. Her full name is Alyssa Ogawa, and I'm not sure if the first name had been heard at this point, but apparently this is the first episode we hear her surname.
Thanks again for listening. That is us done with another one. I hope you enjoyed it. Next time we will be talking about the return of Wesley Crusher in The First Duty. So I hope you'll join us for that one. Until then, farewell.
Goodbye.
Goodbye.